Hi, in this video we are going to talk about the basics of C++, or we will introduce C++. So we will start the video with talking about the basic difference between C and C++, or the fundamental difference between C and C++. Then we will talk about tokens in C++. We will see one of the basic programs, and then we will see what are the different tokens. And going towards the end of the video, we will talk about difference between declaration and definition. So in case you guys are already aware and confident about these particular topics, you can just skip the video and go to the next video. In case you are not, and I will also tell you that sometimes we ignore these concepts because these are very basic concepts, but then you might get some MCQ or you might get some question around in your interview around these concepts. So it is better to just go around with the video and understand these basic concepts, okay? So let's just go ahead. So as we said, we will talk about the difference between C and C++. So C was already there before C++ existed. Then why C++? And how was C++ much better than C? Okay. When C++ was developed, it was known as C with classes. So basically, C++ is an object-oriented language. It has got the concepts or uses the concepts of C classes and objects. We will see what is an object-oriented language. We will talk about very much in brief in this video. In upcoming videos, we have talked about the whole object-oriented principles and all the concepts related to it. Here we will just have an overview, as this is a kind of overview video. Okay, so what happens is that C is a functional programming language, whether C++ is an object-oriented language. This is the fundamental difference. Now talking about object-oriented as well, what happens is that in C++, you need not write all the program using classes and objects. Have class in each and every program. You can write a C++ program just like a C program. Obviously, there will be syntax difference, but you need not have the classes. Like in Java, if you have to write a program, you have to have a class around it, okay? But that is not the case in C++. So also C++ is known as a partial object-oriented language, okay? So as I said that obviously there are other differences between C and C++. There's a basic syntax difference as well. But that is a different thing. That is not something we are going to talk about. Here we are going to talk about the fundamental difference, which is C is a functional programming language and C++ is an object-oriented language. Now let's see what is an object-oriented language and what is a functional language. We will see very quickly. So basically when I say functional programming language, here the basic unit that you can say is function. And the whole attention is towards making that function. And basically the function is the one in which all the operations is happening. So whenever you get a problem, okay, so let's say you have a problem to solve. Let's say in this case, let's say also you have a problem to solve. We will first see how we solve it in this particular case, and then we will see how to solve in this particular case. So when we have a problem, our focus is to make functions, as I said. So what we will do is that we will divide the problem into subproblems. And we will keep on doing the division unless we reach a place where we will write a function. So now what the function will do, function is just like a mathematical function in which you will be given an input, you will be giving an input. So you will be giving the input as per the parameter. So in case you know functions before, that's great. In case you don't worry, we will talk about functions as well. It is not the case that functions is there only in case of C. There is functions in case of C++, there is function in case of Java, it is known as method. But here the major focus is function, right? In this case, it's going to be objects and classes. We will talk about that. So in what happens in a function is that you will be giving some input. The input is given as the parameters. So let's say this is the function will have name, and you will be giving the input. Let's say you give some input X. Now, based on whatsoever input you have given, you will be processing that input and you will be giving some output. Let's say you give it Y. So at the end of the day in C, your focus is what are the functions I have to make and what are the operations that particular function will perform. So this is the basic unit, or you can say building block of a functional language. Now let's say in case of object-oriented language, you are given a problem. So here you don't much bother about what are the functions. We will talk about it later on, but the first focus is what will be the classes and what will be the classes and objects. So let's say if you are given a problem, you will bother about what are the classes I am going to make. Okay, so now what are classes, what are objects, what is it we are talking about? Let me again give you a quick overview. So basically we have two things, classes and objects. So classes is nothing but a blueprint. Okay, so now let's say you have to make something like So let's say you have to design something like a parking lot, okay, a very common question. You have to design a parking lot. So in case of designing a parking lot, we will see that what are the real world entities that will be there. In this real world entity, we will have a car, we will have a parking space, let's call it parking space, right? And let's not get into the whole design. Let's say there these are two things. So now the thing with object oriented language is that it is too much in touch with the real world. You know, as I said, that when you will think of parking lot, you will think of the real world entities that exist. There will be a car, there will be a parking space, there will be someone releasing the ticket. But here now what happens is that, let's say you know that car exists. Now you will create a class called car. So basically what will be happening in class is that class will just define that this is how a car should be and this is what a car should do. So basically the class will just tell that, okay, a car should have maybe wheels, a car should have maybe seats, and a car should be able to drive. Okay, so these are the nouns of that particular real world entity and these are the verbs. This is like what that particular thing should have and this is like what that particular thing should do. So now this class just defines that this is what it should do. Okay, now the class does not exist. So let's say you made a pen and you used a sheet and you defined that a car should have wheels, a car should have seat, and a car should drive. That is something that does not exist. It's just a concept, it's just a blueprint. What actually exists is an object, right? So when you use these stuffs, when you use these information and you build a real car, then that is called as object. So basically classes just informs that these are the things that has to be done. They don't exist. What actually exists is an object. So we will see again as we go ahead that how classes and objects are made. Don't worry about that, we will see in detail. But this is just to give you an information that object-oriented language is very much in touch with the real world. And when we get a problem, we focus on what are the real world entities. This is how we think in case of object-oriented language. What are the real world entities? And then we try and convert them in classes and objects. And then we see, as you can see, we are bothering about, okay, now this is a class, that what are the functions that these classes will have? Okay, what are the things that this class will do? Whereas in case of function, the major agenda is to think that what are the functions that has to be made. Okay, this is the major difference between C and C++, or for that matter any functional programming language and object-oriented language. We know that the other object-oriented language is Java as well. So this is one of the benefits of learning of C++. C++ has got all the concepts like pointers, and it has all the C++ has got all the concepts like pointers, structures, and also it has got concepts like object-oriented language. So if you learn C++, it benefits you to a great extent. Now, apart from this, many people have this question that what are the applications of C++? Is someone actually using C++? Let me tell you some of the applications of C++ which will make you even more interested in learning C++. So now let's go ahead and see some of the applications of C++. So Adobe Systems, you all must be knowing about it. This is one of the dream companies of most of the students. So in this case, let's see what are the major applications developed in C++. So we have Photoshop, again you all must be knowing, Illustrator, Acrobat, InDesign, Go Live, Frame. So it is designed both in C and C++. Apart from this, we have Maya. So if you might not have heard, but I know when I was in college, we went for a workshop and there they were using some animation thing and Maya was being used there. So it is one of the animation software, and as you can see, it is Maya has been used in the production of just about every film involving computer-generated effects since its release, including Star Wars, Episode 1, Spider-Man, Lord of the Rings, Stuart Little, etc. Though I have not watched much of these movies though. You must have watched anyways. So this is one of the applications. Let's go ahead. Then OS X is written in mix of language, but a few important parts of our C++. The two most interesting are Finder and IOKit device driver. So Finder is just like Explorer in Windows. In case you guys have Mac, you must be knowing it. So we have MDocs, another tech giant. So we have its main telecom building module is completely in C++. Then we have DShaw, financial analysis and trading software in C++. Then we have Google, web search engine, etc. These two are written in C++. So as I said, that there are many applications of C++. One of the common thing that languages are Apart from that, in case you guys are coding in C++, it really helps you a lot in competitive programming and interviews as well. So I'll say it's really a good language to go ahead. So let's just go ahead and talk more about C++. Now let's go ahead and see a very basic program of C++. So the best way to learn a language is to write programs in it. So when you will start writing the programs, everything might not be very crystal clear to you. So there are few things that you need to understand really well to write the programs on your own, but there are few things that you need to know the overview, and as you will go ahead, you will know all the basics of it in the details. Okay, so here let's see what are the things that's required here. So as I said, that there are few things that you need to understand very well, and there are few things that we're going to talk about in pretty much detail as we go ahead, but we will ensure that you know what is it and you understand that thing properly right now. Okay, so if you run this program, at the end of the day, what is the agenda? I write some instructions, I run it in the computer, and computer gives me some output. Okay, so if you run this particular program, your output is going to be hello world. So this is generally first program of many of these students. Now, what will happen in this case, how the hello world is getting printed, how the elements are talking to each other, let's see. So in this case, the first line, this is hash include. This hash include does the task of including this IOStream library. So when I say including this IOStream library, what does that mean? So basically this IOStream is a library. What happens in a library is that there are several functions that are predefined. So basically, let's say if I have to do the task of printing something, I don't need to just get a hold of the console. At the end of the day, we are printing on the console, right? When we run the program, there's something printed on the console. So there are so many things that's going on in behind to print the thing that I'm telling to the console. But I don't have to take care of all of these. There is a function that has already taken care of that. And what we need to do is that we just need to call that function. Okay, so we will talk about function in detail, but you can think of function as just like we have seen previously, as well as like, there is a name of the function. Let's say there is a name, and this particular function does some task. Okay, it does some task, and there are few lines that's written to perform the task. You don't right now have to bother about how the task has to be done. You just bother about that what is the name of the function, okay, and what is the task that the name is doing. Because obviously if you have to order food, you have to know that, okay, I have to open Swiggy and order food, right? Similarly here, if you have to get the things printed, you have to know which function is doing it. This is another thing. The second thing is that you have to know that what are the parameters that you have to pass. So in this case, cout is the function that is doing the task of printing things on the console. Now what you have to give it to this particular function, you have to give it what is to be printed. So here hello world has to be printed. So we will talk about complete input output thing, that how in different ways we do the input output. But as of now, understand that this cout is a function that does the task of printing. Okay, and now what is library? The question still remains the same. So now this cout function is inside this particular library. So basically there will be a library and there will be lots of functions defined inside this particular library. So if you have to use cout function, you have to include this particular library in your code. Okay, so this is the use of IOStream. IOStream is input output stream. So this is the library for performing input and output. So there is one thing we have already seen, cout is for output. We will see as we go ahead and talk about the input output in different lecture. We will see what is cin as well. Okay, so now here you must have understood this line. Now the second line is using namespace SDT. Now we just saw that there are several functions and all the functions are inside a library. Now similarly, there are going to be many libraries, right? So now let's say there is a space and we have several libraries. So now if there are going to be so many libraries, it will be difficult to manage them. So to manage them better, what we do is that we club libraries in a particular namespace. So let's say this is a particular area, I put certain libraries here. This was a particular area, I put certain libraries here. So now what I'll do is that I'll name this particular namespace SDT. So this area is known as namespace and the name of this particular space is STD. And this is STD, why? Because this is standard library of C++. You can make your own libraries. For that matter, you can make your own functions. You will be making your own functions for sure. And you can make your own namespace as well. But here, this is the standard namespace of C++ that we use. Hence, it's called STD. When I say using namespace std, these two are keywords. We will talk about what is keywords. So I'm just telling the compiler that I am using this namespace std. Okay, the name in itself defines itself, right? So now let's go ahead. What happens is that if you write any C++ program, it starts its execution from main. Whenever you run a program, it will look for main. Okay, so here what will happen is that it will look for main. This is the main function. This is the return type of main. This is int right now. As of now, to write the programs, you can write int, and when you write int, make sure you add this return 0 as well. Okay, for this we will talk about when we talk about functions in detail. As of now, whenever you write a program, just put int main and you just add return 0. If you don't add return 0, you will get some errors. Okay, now let's go ahead. So this is a block. So this main, we saw that every function has certain tasks. So whatever task it has to do, whatever lines you have to execute, you will put inside this particular braces. These are known as curly braces. Okay, so now let's go ahead what's happening. So we saw that this line is responsible for printing hello world. So now what happens is that this cout function is there. We will include library to ensure to know what are the functions that a cout does. So as soon as we do this, as soon as this line gets executed, cout function is called and hello world get printed. Okay, this is a very small program. We will talk about return 0 in detail when we talk of function. So as of now, if you start writing the programs, these two lines we have to add for sure. Int main you have to have for sure. Return 0 you have to have for sure. And here everything in between will keep on changing. In the beginning there will be small programs. As you go ahead, it will be big programs. So this is the place from where you can start programming. Make sure you write this program, you run this program, and you have this hello world output. Okay, let's put an exclamation mark here as well. Make sure you have this. Okay, so now what happens is that a language has got so many things. As I said that they're going to be input, they're going to be output, you're going to have your own namespace, you're going to declare your own functions. So don't get boggled too much by that. If you try to learn everything in one go, that might not be possible. But if you keep on learning things slowly and slowly, then you will learn it, and you will learn it very well. And I'm repeating, the best way to learn a language, to write programs in that language. So right now, let's say you know that if you have to print something, how will you print it? But tomorrow, let's say you have to know that how do I input something, or let's say how do I add things, how do I multiply. So these are the different kind of queries that will come in picture, and as these queries come and as you keep on gaining knowledge, your knowledge of a particular language will become good. And I'm repeating, many people ask that what is the best way to master a language? The best way to master a language is to write programs in that language. So now let's go ahead and see certain things. Okay, so next thing we are going to talk about is tokens. So when we ask about what is a token, token is the smallest element of a program that a compiler can understand. Now what happens is that when you run this, when you write this particular program, you will save it somewhere. You can either use some IDE or you can save it in Notepad. Okay, you will save it using .cpp extension. Okay, now after saving it, the first thing that will happen is compilation. If you are using any IDE, it will have a button compile. You will just compile it, right? After you compile it, the other thing that happens is that this particular program runs into or gets converted into a executable format. So basically, at the end of the day, a machine just understands 0 and 1. So the compiler understands that what is this particular code and converts into a language that a machine can understand, which is in binary format. Now after this converts into an executable format, the other thing that happens is that the program runs. We run the program. In case you are running using, in case you are having an IDE, you will have an option to run as well. In case you are doing it on your own, what happens is that we have compilation we can do using this particular G++, name of the file, let's call it example.cpp. You will have to install the C++ compiler. So you need to have a compiler, or you need to have a software that understands what are these things. And in this particular next section, we will see how compiler is understanding all the things. So basically the agenda of compiler is to understand what are the text that's written in the particular code and convert that to machine level code. Okay, so the compilation happens either through that, or if you're either through an IDE, you can have any IDE. And if you're using not an IDE and what you're doing is that, let's say you're trying to run it through command line, or in case of Mac, you're doing it through terminal. In that case, what will happen is that you will have to run this program G++ example.cpp. CPP. Okay, and for you to be able to run this, you should already have C++ compiler installed in your computer. After this, there is a file that gets made, that is a.out. Okay, now you can also give name to this particular file. You can change the name as well. Apart from that, let's say this is a.out. Now you have to run this particular file, so you just need to put a.out in your machine. So at some places what happens is that, so towards the end of the program we will see, towards the end of the lecture we will see how to run a program and how to run it as well. Okay, we will be following this particular method only because it's easy to run using any IDE. You'll have run compile. This is also easy, you just need to know 1 or 2 command lines. Okay, so coming back, so now what happens is that when the compilation is happening, so as I said that there should be a compiler which understands how things are happening. So if you try to run the same program using C compiler, you will get compilation error. When the error comes, when a compiler comes across something which it is not understanding, it throws an error, right? So if someone, let's say you don't know French, and someone starts talking to you in French, you won't be able to process it. Similar is the case with compiler. So now what happens is that everything that a compiler can understand is a token. Just like when we are conversing, the smallest element that we have is a word, right? Word is the smallest element, and everything that we can understand, be it be vowel, be it be adjective, be it be verb, we can put it that we can say that it is going to be a word. Similarly, we have tokens here. Everything that a compiler can understand, smallest element of a program that compiler can understand is called token. Now, the token is further divided into certain subcategories. We have keywords, we have identifiers, we have constants, we have strings, we have special symbols, and we have operators. So this particular program, if you see, everything is a token. Now, some of these are going ahead keywords, some of these are identifiers, some of these are special symbols, some of these are strings. So let's just go ahead and see what are these stuff. So basically you can say that token is the category and all of these is the subcategory. So at the end of the day, all of these are tokens only. It's just that they have been divided into certain parts based on the functionalities they have. Okay, so till now we have understood what are tokens. Let's just go ahead and understand each of them one by one. We will understand keywords, identifiers, constant, string, special symbols, and operators. We'll start with identifiers. Understanding of identifiers will help us in understanding keywords as well. Let's just go ahead. So what are identifiers? So basically identifiers refer to the name of variables, classes, structure, functions, arrays given by the programmer. So basically if you declare any of your own variable or any of your own element in the program, be it be, as you can see, variables, classes, structure, objects, functions, arrays, so anything you declare on your own, you will have to give it a name, right? So in this case here we have x as the variable. Now let's say if you have a function, you are going to have it this way, something like that, int xyz. Okay, so this xyz is a variable, this xyz is a identifier. As you will go ahead, you will declare structures, you will have functions, you will have arrays, you will have classes, you will have objects. So when you are giving names to them, you will understand that okay, this is an identifier. So now what happens is that when you are naming an identifier or when you are creating an identifier, so there has to be certain rules that you have to follow. Let's just go ahead and see those rules. So these are the rules. First, character must be an alphabet or underscore. It must only contain letters, digits, or underscore. Cannot use a keyword. Must not contain white space. And they are case sensitive. So when I say case sensitive, which means that XYZ and XYZ, these are two different identifiers, right? So it shouldn't be the case that you're declaring XYZ and then you're using it somewhere in some different case, right? And you must be hearing the word declaring again and again. So in case you are thinking what is declaring, so int x was one of the example of declaring a variable. We will see what is declaring and what is defining a variable. We'll see that as we go ahead. Okay, now let's come back here. So now let's say you have to declare an identifier. All of these rules you should know. It's good to remember. First of all, it will obviously help you in declaring a variable. First of all, it will help you in naming. And in case you are going beyond these particular rules, you will get compilation error. Apart from that, there might be questions in MCQ around this. So let's do one thing. Let me write down some identifiers and you have to just tell me that they are valid or not. So pause the video, see they are valid or not, and then we'll come back and see how it is, if you are right or wrong. Okay. Now can you just go across each of them, just note them down, pause the video, just write valid and invalid in front of them and come back and see what are the results. So I hope you have tried. Let's just go ahead and see them one by one. So this particular is valid. Is this following the rule? Yes. It is starting with underscore and it is only having letters as it's in its name, right? Then we have this one. Is it valid? Yes. It is only having letters and underscore in its name, and it is also starting from an alphabet. So this is again valid. Is this valid? Yes, again this is valid. Is this valid? No, this is not valid. First of all, it is not starting with an alphabet or underscore. Plus this @ is also not falling in the category of letters, digits or underscore. By letters we mean it has to be from A to Z, small letter, or A to Z, and digit we mean 0 to 9, but that is not the case here. So this is invalid. Is this valid? No, again we have a white space in between, so this is not valid, this is invalid. Is this valid? No, int is a keyword. So here we are saying cannot use a keyword. So we will talk about keyword, just telling you about it. So basically keyword has a predefined meaning. So that is why you cannot have a keyword, because that will be like redefining the meaning of something that already exists. Basically you are trying to redefine it, which is not allowed in C++. So this is invalid. And this is again invalid because it is having this special character which is not allowed in an identifier. Great. So make sure you have got this all right, and let's just go ahead and see what is a keyword. Okay, so what are keywords? Keywords have fixed meanings and these meanings cannot be changed. So basically these meanings are fixed by C++ already and they have a special meaning. So whenever compiler knows that okay, these are the keywords, and whenever it comes across a certain keyword, it knows that okay, this particular thing has this particular meaning and these things have to be performed. Okay, so let's say in this case, what are the keywords? So in this case, this include is a keyword, this using is a keyword, this namespace is a keyword, this int is a keyword. So in this case, cout is not a keyword, it's a library function that is out there. Okay, so this is a keyword, this return is a keyword, and these have special meaning. So like in this particular case, when I say using namespace, the compiler knows that at this particular place I have to use this std namespace. Okay, so it understands that. Similarly here, int has a special meaning. We will understand what is int, what is return over here. So in this function, this is a return that is happening, so we will talk about it. So basically each of them have a special meaning that tells the compiler that okay, this is what has to be done, or this is the meaning. Now if you are wondering that how do I remember all the keywords, so let me tell you, you don't have to just sit and remember all the keywords. Okay, so as you will keep on going ahead, you will be doing the coding. So just now, let's say, you know, in past few minutes you have already known that these are the keywords, and next time when you encounter them, you know that okay, this is how it is. Similarly, as you keep on coding, what will happen is that you will keep on coming across keywords and you will understand what are they. Okay, so these are keywords, I'm repeating, they have special meanings, their meanings are already defined, and this is one of the reasons we can't use them as identifiers, because then we try and redefine them, which is not allowed. Okay, let's just go ahead. So next we have is constants. So what are constants? Constants refer to fixed values that do not change during execution of the program. Okay, so now let's see something. Now let's say we want to have something. Okay, let's say I want to have a variable x and I want to keep 5 in this x. And I don't want that this value of x equal to 5 should change anywhere. Because in the program, in a normal C++ program, you can keep the value of x equal to 5 and then you can just make it x equal to 7 going ahead in the program. But I don't want that. I just want that it should remain 5 as it is. So how are we going to ensure that? So we ensure that using const keyword. So generally we use constants only when we have such kind of requirement that the value of this particular thing should not be changed. Okay, so let's see some of the examples. So as I said that you are going to make a variable constant using the keyword const. This is the keyword. Now there are few interesting things about constants that you should know. So as you go ahead, you will see constant characters, you will see constant integers, you will see constant characters. As you go ahead, you will see constant integers, which we are going to see even now as well. You will have constant characters, you will have constant strings, you will have constant arrays, you will have constant pointers. So as you keep on going ahead, you will come across these things, and anytime you have to understand that if something is constant, which means that its value cannot be changed going ahead in the program. Now what are the few things that you should know? So in this case we have constant x. Now x has to have some value. So let's say if you just put const int x, somewhere in your program. So let's say we have something like main. Let's say this is the main function, and we write down const int x, and then we do x equal to 20. So this will give you an error. Why? Let me tell you. The thing with the constant variables is that they should be initialized at the same place they are declared. So this is the right way. So you have to do const int x equal to 20. If you try and do this, this will give you an error. Apart from that, even if you try and do like const int x equal to 20, and somewhere later in the program if you do x equal to 30, this will again give you an error. So many times this is a very interesting MCQ question. So you will be given this particular scenario and you will be asked what will be the output. So some of us might go ahead and just put that x equal to 20 will be the output, but the actual output for this is going to be an error. Okay, so make sure you try these things on your own as well. Just run this, just take any compiler or IDE and just run this and see that how things are happening, what are the output you are getting, what sort of error you are getting, even in error, what is the error that compiler is telling you. Okay, so make sure you do these kind of stuff and it will really help you around. So just now we saw that we can be having character constant as well. So you don't have to do anything for character constant. You just need to do const char x equal to a, right? So you just have to get the data type here and you have to use the const keyword. Again, just now we came across a new keyword which is const. Okay, and as we will go ahead, we will talk about arrays and pointers. We will see how to have a constant pointers and constant arrays and what are constant arrays and things like that we will talk about. Okay, now let's just go ahead. Now we have special symbols. So these are some special symbols which obviously convey special meaning to the compiler. So in this case, these are few special symbols. So this is a pointer. So this is called asterisk, and we generally use to declare a pointer, or we use it to get a value from a address. We will see about it, okay, when we talk about pointers. This is generally we use in case of arrays. In arrays, to have the size of the array, we use this particular, or to access a particular index, we use this particular subscript, okay. Then this is also, as you can see, is a square bracket. Then we have curly braces. So as you can see, curly braces denote start and end of the block. So in this case, we have a small code, everything is within one block. But as you will go ahead and you will write long codes, you will see that you will have multiple blocks. You will need that to have multiple blocks. Again, when we go ahead, we will see the use case of multiple blocks. And then we have this particular, which is known as preprocessor directive. So we have already seen this while we were talking about the basic program of C++. Then this is a tilde operator. So this is generally used in case of destructor. Then we have a dot operator. And we missed something, this small comma. So we can have various use of comma. So generally, let's say we have int x comma y. Okay, so here we are using it to separate two variables. We generally use comma to separate the elements. Then we also have something called semicolon. So this is generally denotes the termination of a particular statement. Apart from that, we also have bracket. So this particular bracket you must have seen, we generally use in case of functions, we generally use it there. So again, as I said, that as we keep on coding, we will keep on coming across these particular elements. And then here we also have a special symbol. As we keep on coding, we will keep on coming across such elements. Now let's just go ahead. So now we have operators. Again, we'll talk in detail. We'll have an entire different video on operators. Let's have a basic notion about it here. So basically, operators are nothing. Operators, I'll say, are the ones who are bringing the maths into the language. So just like we have plus, minus, multiplication, division, we have certain operators here as well which perform certain functions. So now we have three kind of operators: unary operator, binary operator, and ternary operator. So basically, unary operator is something that works on a single operand. Binary works on two operands, and ternary works on three operands. Example of unary is postfix, or you can say increment operator. Now increment is again post and pre, we'll talk about it. Then we have decrement operator. Again, we will talk about it as we go ahead. And then we also have a negation operator. Then in case of binary, we will have plus, minus, division, modulo, division, multiplication. Then we also have and, or. We have again in binary operator, we have mathematical operator, we have logical operators. In case of logical, we have and, we have or, we have single and, we have single or. These are some of the operators. In case of ternary, we have conditional statement operator. So this generally works in this way, that we have a condition and it's like if this condition is true, then a particular set of statement will get executed. Let's say statement 1 will get executed. If this is false, statement 2 will get executed. Again, we will talk about all of these in complete detail. We have a separate video on this, okay? And in that video, we will talk of more operators. There are many more operators apart from these. So we will talk about that in detail, okay? Okay, so next we have strings. Strings are nothing but array of characters. So what is array of characters? So now what will happen is that when you will start writing program, let's say if you have to add two numbers, you can simply do x equal to 10, y equal to 20, and you will simply do x plus y. But now let's say going ahead, you will have to add 100 numbers, or you'll have to add 200 numbers or 1000 numbers. In this case, you cannot have 1000 different variables to store 1000 numbers. So what you will do is that you will use array. So basically array is something like this. You can think of like a list, okay? So you will have an array, and in array you can have a same data type. If you are storing number, you have to store numbers. If you are storing characters, you have to store characters, right? You cannot store array plus characters. That's not allowed in array. So now what will happen is that you will have an array to store 100 numbers. You will have an array to store 1000 numbers. So now it is at a place and you can just use them. But now, as I said, that this is an array and it can have character, it can have float, it can have integer. So now strings are nothing but array of characters. So basically if we have an array like this, and in this I am storing character in each and every box, then this is nothing but string. This whole array of characters is called string. So we will talk about it in detail. So here are some of the examples. So in this case, what is it here is that this x is, as you can see, this is x, this is name of the array. This x is an identifier here. This 15 is the size. We saw these particular brackets in special symbols, right? This 15 is the size. Basically size of this array is going to be of 15. And then we have this particular characters over here. So in this what will happen is that we will have an array like this. We will have P, we'll have R, we have E, we have P, we'll have B, we'll have Y, we'll have T, we'll have E, we'll have S, we'll have exclamation, and at the end we will have a null character. So basically this null character, you can't see it here, but it is by default put by the compiler. It just denotes the end of that particular string. Okay, it exists in case of strings. It exists in case of strings, right? So this is how it is. So all of these will be eventually stored in this particular manner only. Obviously this will be different because it is just PREP. But it will be stored in this particular manner only, PREP. These are the different ways of declaring them. In this case, I am putting size 15. In this case, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Plus, there will be one space for this null character as well. So, this will be of size 10. Okay. As I said, we'll see completely what are size and how to have the length of the array and how to use the array, how to traverse the array. We will have this complete thing in arrays. And this is another way of declaring a string. So, these are the different ways of declaring a string. Okay, now let's just go ahead. So this brings us to the end of all the tokens. We have discussed all the tokens. So as I said that when you will keep on writing the programs, if you try and remember these, you might not be able to remember, honestly. But if you try and write the programs, you will understand things even better. So I highly suggest that just start writing the programs. So you can watch these videos plus 4 or 5 other videos that are of basics and just start writing programs. Towards the end of this video, we will see one program how to write a very small program, okay? So now as I was using the word declaring again and again, let's see what is a declaration. And one of the very common interview question that comes up is the difference between declaration and definition. So let's just go ahead and see that. Now let's just go ahead and see the difference between declaration and definition. So now while we're talking about the difference, we will also understand what each of these means, right? So now here I have written 4 statements. I really want you guys to go through these 4 statements and just write it down that whether this is a declaration or definition. Now in case you know about declaration and definition, you can do the exercise, else let's just go ahead with the video. So now what happens is that before you use any particular user defined element, it could be a variable, it could be a class, it could be a structure, it could be a function, right? It could be an object. Okay, so before you use any of these, you have to inform the compiler that this particular thing exists. So basically a variable will have a name, a class will have a name, structure will have a name, function will have a name, object will have a name. So the name that we are going to have, before we use that particular name and do any particular operation, we have to inform the compiler that this thing exists. So just like if you would have seen in the code, we were using cout, and for that what we were doing is that we were importing the library, we were including the library IOStream, right? Why were we doing that? Because this cout was existing in IOStream library, and if we wouldn't include IOStream, the compiler wouldn't know that what does cout means. Similarly, what happens is that before we use anything, we have to inform the compiler that this exists. That kind of informing the compiler is called declaration. So when we go ahead, we will talk about class, structure, function and objects and how do we declare and define. Let's here focus on variables. Now variables could be integers, it could be numbers, it could be strings, it could be characters, it could be an array. So now when I am just telling you that declare a variable, which means that I am just informing the compiler that it exists. So let's say I have a function main, and in this I am simply doing x plus y equal to 20. Okay. Here, let's say I have a function main, and in this I am doing x equal to 20. Now here the compiler doesn't know x at all. The compiler doesn't know that whether it is valid to put 20 value in the x or not. So in order to take these decisions for the compiler has to know that what is the data type of the x. So when we declare, we just inform the compiler it exists and what are the properties that apply to it. And how do we declare it? So as I said that there are different ways to declare each of these. In case of variables, we simply put the data type and we have name of the variable. So this is the data type of the variable, this is name of the variable. There are different data types, we will talk about each data type, what significance the data type holds. So right now basically you can just understand that this particular data type just informs the compiler that the x is of type integer and it has got certain properties, right? So again, declaring is just about informing the compiler. So in the previous case, if you remove this and you just do x equal to 20, you will get compilation error, but right now you won't get any error. So now, okay, so now we have informed the compiler that x exists. So now what happens is that whenever you are coding or whenever you are writing a program or whenever the program is executing, everything has to be there in the memory. So now when we have x over here, the x has to be there somewhere in the memory. So by defining, I mean the definition basically does, what it does is that it just allocates some memory to x. So basically it just allocates some space in the memory to x. So here let's say x is of 4 bytes. So it will allocate x 4 bytes in the memory. So basically declaring is just informing the compiler and defining is allocating memory to that particular variable in the memory. Alright. Now let's come back here and see that what are the declarations and what are the definitions. So in this case int x, this is both declaring as well as defining. In this case I am informing the compiler plus also I am storing some space in memory for x. Okay. How much memory is again decided by this particular thing. Now we have int x equal to 20. This is again declaration as well as definition. Some people get confused. They think that this is declaration and when we are doing x equal to 20, this is definition. That is not the case. This x equal to 20 is called initialization. Okay, when we are initializing some value to that particular variable. Now we have extern int x. So this extern keyword, let's understand what is this is. Okay, so this extern keyword has its own meaning. So when we are doing extern int x, this is just declaring. So now what happens, let's say we have two files f1 and f2. Let's say we have extern int x here. So what happens is that when we do extern int x, this is just declaring, there is no space allocated to x. This just informs the compiler that x is defined somewhere in other file. So if it is extern, there won't be any compilation error. This is just informing the compiler that x is defined in some other files. Okay, so there are multiple files, it could be defined in f2 as well. So let's say if I do int x in f2, we can simply do int x equal to 20. Okay, now we have int fun. This is declaring a function. We will talk in detail about declaring a function and defining a function. This is just the declaration, this is not the definition. So that is the importance of declaration and definition. So that was all the theory part that we went across. So let's just finish the video, and before finishing the video, let's just run a very small program of C++ and make sure you also get into writing programs. So as you can see, this is a very small program of C++ that we saw. Here we are including the iostream library. Here we are using namespace std. This is the main function. Here we are having the cout hello world, and here we are just returning 0. So what we will do is that we will try and run this function and see what is the output. So as I said, that if you have to run using the terminal, what you can do is simply you can put this particular program g++ example.cpp. You have to write the name of this particular file. So now the compilation has happened. After the compilation happened, now it has been converted to an executable file, and that is called a.out. Now simply run that particular file. Okay, so as you can see, this is hello world that is getting printed here. So here we are doing this particular thing. We are not doing directly a.out. So it depends upon that where the a.out file is getting generated. Okay, so accordingly we will put the path of a.out, right? So now here we have hello world that has already got printed here. So make sure you write this program, and make sure you write even bigger programs, and all the very best for your journey ahead.